Soviet scientists feared they had uncovered evidence of alien life beneath the Kola Superdeep well.
They reached 12,262 meters in the Kola Superdeep well, but what they found deep below still defies explanation.
What if the deepest hole on Earth didn't just uncover ancient rocks, but something that science still can't explain? What if the Soviets, in their obsessive Cold War quest for knowledge, reached depths so extreme they unearthed not only geological anomalies, but eerie sounds and unexplained phenomena? Did they really drill into a hellish underworld? Or is that just legend? Today, we'll plunge into the chilling and awe-inspiring story of the Kola Superdeep Borehole, uncovering what the Soviets found and what the world still can't explain. This isn't just a story of rock and earth. This is a mystery that goes 12,262 meters deep, digging into the unknown. At the peak of Cold War rivalries, when the United States was pouring resources into conquering space, the Soviet Union took a radically different path. While one superpower dreamed of the moon, the other turned its gaze inward, deep into the Earth itself. The Soviets wanted to go where no one had ever dared, to drill into the crust and uncover the hidden history buried beneath our feet. And not for oil or gas, but for pure science. This was more than a technological challenge. It was an ideological statement. If the Americans were going to dominate the skies, the Soviets would dominate the depths. Thus, the Kola Superdeep Borehole was born. In 1970, a team of Soviet scientists and engineers began drilling in the far northwestern part of the country, on the Kola Peninsula near the Arctic Circle. This remote location was chosen carefully. Geologically, the area formed part of the Baltic Shield, one of the oldest exposed parts of Earth's crust. Here, some rocks date back more than 3 billion years. In essence, drilling into the Kola terrain was like performing a time machine experiment, traveling back through the ancient history of the planet, layer by layer. And with Earth's crust being thickest on continental plates, it posed an ambitious target, a test of both science and engineering against the planet's natural defenses. The intended goal was indeed making history, to reach a depth of 15,000 meters deeper than any well has ever gone before. In other words, that's almost 50,000 feet, over 5 times as high as a commercial airliner might fly. But there was more to it than just going deep for depth's sake. The mission was to find out what lay below the surface, the true makeup of the Earth's crust, the geological layers, and whether the seismic data used to map out the planet actually reflected reality. The Kola Superdeep wasn't looking for fuel, it was looking for truth. The well was opened on May 24, 1970, and drilling progressed slowly but steadily. The team made use of oil and gas technology, modified so as to adapt with extreme pressure and heat as they went down. At first, everything progressed according to the plans. In 1974, they reached 7,263 meters deep, and it was already a great achievement. But beneath that lay the unknown. As they kept pushing down, new geological phenomena appeared, unexpected rock formations, inexplicable density changes, and rising temperatures that defy predictions. Innovation from the Soviet engineers was quite remarkable. For example, instead of using conventional rotary drilling methods, they began using a turbine drill. This device was very strange in that the entire drill string was stationary while only the bit rotated. Such a device made it possible to deal with the unprecedented torque and tension at unprecedented depths. The turbine drill was over 45 meters long and powered an ultra-durable drill head. Yet, that did not mean that the borehole had not to overcome resistance from Earth itself. Every meter drilled became exponentially harder. The deeper they went, the more their assumptions were challenged. This program was not simply an engineering challenge. It was a scientific pilgrimage into the most secretive of corridors of the planet. The Soviet crew was increasing geological enlightenment with every meter. Perhaps more importantly, they were touching parts of the Earth left untouched for over 3 billion years. It was like finding some hidden script that had been written during the childhood of the planet. The Earth had been patient, but it was about to push back. And the Kola team would pay the price for going too deep, too fast. The Earth fought back. For years, the Kola Superdeep project had been progressing steadily, defying limitations of both technology and imagination. Every meter drilled into the ancient rock seemed like a small victory against the planet itself. But beneath the celebration and scientific excitement, tension simmered. The Earth was never going to yield its secrets without resistance. And eventually, it did just that, with devastating consequences. The very crust the Soviets had been trying to understand turned hostile, and all it took was a brief pause in their mission to spark one of the greatest setbacks in drilling history. In late 1984, after more than a decade of relentless drilling, the Kola team took a short break to attend the International Geological Congress in Moscow. When they returned to the site on September 27th, they expected to continue their work where they left off. But nature had other plans. While the drill was idle, time and pressure had conspired to change the well itself. Sections of the borehole that had not yet been reinforced with steel casing had begun to deform. Without continuous drilling and support, the rock walls shifted subtly, but significantly. And when the team attempted to resume operations, they realized something was horribly wrong. Just when they started to lift the drill string to check the equipment, it got stuck. After futile attempts at getting the pipe free, the pipe under intense pressure finally broke. A catastrophic failure. 5 kilometers of drill pipe and the turbine drill, the utmost man-hours and years of labor, have been wedged forever into the borehole. This tragedy shattered the team, the gravest setback had ever faced by the project. Just like that, all 5 years of work literally collapsed into the same earth. Instead of laying down their arms, the Soviets took the road of gradual adaptation. They opted to drill around the blockage, a complex maneuver that involved intervening in the dense, unstable rock layers to make new ways. What had begun as a straight plunge into the ground was now slowly breaking up into branches and forking paths like a twisting underground river. New deviations would be planned by engineers to bypass the stuck equipment. But each deviation came with its own set of risks, resulting in a borehole that was no longer a straight line, but rather a curiously winding structure of side tunnels and deformations, a geological labyrinth into the abyss. Navigating this complex underground would not only be difficult, but also be dangerous. New paths presented new unknowns. Every turn into a new unknown zone would mean different temperatures, different pressures, and different material compositions. The well had also not been behaving as a mechanical system anyway. It had in many ways turned organic, alive with changing resistances and unpredictable conditions. Engineers were on a daily basis fighting unimaginable forces directly beneath their feet. One of the very toughest among these was heat. The scientists had said that the temperature was supposed to go up steadily by about 11 degrees Celsius for every kilometer. However, deep inside the borehole, that figure rose to an astronomical increase. Between depths of 2.2 and 7.5 kilometers, the increase was already doubled, with nearly 24 degrees Celsius per kilometer. When they got to almost 12 kilometers, it registered a scorching 220 degrees Celsius. These temperatures did not just make things difficult for the instruments, they were destructive to the instruments. Drill bits became dull very quickly, and lubricants failed. There was also no working of the electronics. All these, most importantly, the extreme heat made even the strongest metallic components weak and warped. Yet they continued to push on. 6 more years would elapse after that accident of 1984 before they would meet this goal that had originally been set at 12,672 meters. It costs too much. It was an engineering conspiracy, Frankenstein's monster of a thing, the borehole. Only slightly more than a third into the thickness of crystalline continental crust had even been penetrated, but high temperatures were only the beginning. What they found deep inside the crust shattered more than just rock. It shattered assumptions. Discoveries that defied science. When the Kola Superdeep Borehole crossed the 12-kilometer threshold, the Soviet scientists were expecting to confirm decades of geophysical models. After all, seismic data had mapped what they believed to be the layered structure of the Earth's crust. Predictable transitions from granite to basalt, increasing density, and a steady rise in temperature. Instead, they stumbled into a scientific minefield. Nearly every assumption, crafted from textbooks and seismic studies, was about to be proven wrong. The deeper they drilled, the more reality diverged from theory. Perhaps the first major surprise was the non-appearance of the expected basalt layer. Seismic reflections had indicated the emergence of a harder basalt layer beneath, after around 7 kilometers of granite. This transition zone was vital to the geologic understanding of the crust. But when it came to Kola, it just was not there. The whole thing did not seem to exist at all. Of course, drilling continued past 7 kilometers, then 8, 9, and 10. No basalt at all. Just this fractured, graniteless dense, more porous, and wildly out of line with the predictions of seismic data. The seismic behavior of various rock types already requires rethinking. What has seemed a boundary of density is now something other entirely, a change in fluid saturation, or a change in mineral composition, not a solid layer of basalt. Then came the gold. Ringing in at almost 9.5 kilometers, the borehole passed through a geochemical anomaly, a rock containing up to 1 gram of gold per ton. This was exciting and puzzling. Obviously, commercial mining at that depth was impossible. The very presence of the metal so far down in the earth formulated different questions. Had this gold migrated downward through geological time? Or did it somehow form under high-pressure conditions, deep down below any zone we would normally associate with ore formation? Either way, the deposit was a geological conundrum. Even the unexpected mineral finds were not quite the shocking discoveries that followed. Fossils. In depths over 6 kilometers and in rocks dated older than 2.8 billion years, scientists were able to identify 14 fossilized microorganisms. These were single-celled life forms that were normally associated with the earliest biological activity on Earth. To discover these in rocks that were thought to have formed before complex organic life had evolved was something of a shock. Even more puzzling, some of these fossils were discovered within crystalline formations rather than within sedimentary layers. This meant that the fossils somehow survived or were preserved in conditions that were once deemed unimaginable for life. The implications were profound. If microbial life once existed, or still exists, in the depths of the Earth, where sunlight and surface biology never reached, what did that say about the resilience of life? Could Earth's deep biosphere be far larger than anyone imagined? Could life have originated underground, rather than in the oceans? The Kola Superdeep didn't just challenge geology, it upended biology too. What an extraordinary implication indeed. If any life forms existed or still survive deep down in the Earth, away from the rays of sunlight and surface biology, then how would such resilience alone nature be viewed? Couldn't this essentially mean that Earth's deep biosphere could be immensely larger than what anyone could have previously imagined? Couldn't the life be thought to have originated below the surface instead of in the ocean? Kola Superdeep challenged not just geology, but biology as well. But as strange as these scientific surprises were, they were still within the realm of nature. What came next pushed the boundaries of science and entered the realm of legend. The sound from the deep. Among the many revelations and puzzles that emerged from the Kola Superdeep Borehole, one story has refused to fade. It wasn't a scientific paper or a physical sample, it was a sound. A sound that, according to rumor, came from the deepest part of the earth. The tale was so bizarre, so unsettling, that it escaped the confines of geology and entered global folklore. Some say the Soviets recorded something down there that no one should ever hear. And from that, a legend was born. The story that Soviet scientists had drilled straight into hell. The legend first gained traction in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when a Finnish newspaper published an article claiming that the Kola Superdeep project had picked up strange, non-technogenic sounds from deep within the borehole. According to the report, when the drill reached a certain depth, sensors picked up a terrifying chorus, moaning, wailing, and what sounded like human screams. The paper even claimed to have a sound recording, which quickly spread across tabloids, television, and eventually the early internet. The clip became infamous. Distorted, chaotic noise that many claimed sounded like tortured souls crying out in agony. And it absolutely caught the public's attention. The next day, the story took off. Religious sects cried out that it was proof of a real hell. Conspiracy theorists insisted that the Soviet government shut the experiment down so that no one would find out what they had discovered. Other people said the Kola team simply ran away in fear. Even primary audiences were drawn into the weirdness of it all. The thought that humans had dug so deep to open a door to hell resonated with ancient myths and modern fears alike. No other scientific experiment, before or after, aroused such deep existential terror. But behind all this lies some truth, we suppose. The official denouncement of the story has long been circulated. Allegedly, scientists of the Kola Superdeep project have commented that no microphones were fitted on the drilling rigs. The sensors utilized were seismic and thermal. These measure pressure changes and geological displacements, not sound as we understand it. Furthermore, the original article that spurred this rumor on April 1st, April Fool's Day, was a giveaway in retrospect that it might have been a satire or a hoax. But by then, it was too late. The story had gathered steam on its own, but the legend still lives on for many decades. Its persistence, it is true, owes something to the unrelated admission of the leadership of this project. Interviewed long afterward, David Guberman, an academician and the Kola Superdeep Research Center director, was directly asked about the myth regarding the sounds of hell. He rejected the idea of infernal voices, but then made remarks that only deepened the interest. He said there had indeed been an interesting sound event, something that was unexplained. The director stated that, as an honest scientist, he couldn't say he knew exactly what happened there. Guberman said that an unusual noise was recorded, followed by a subdued explosion. They investigated the phenomenon, but detected no structural damage, nor could they reproduce it. Again, anything that occurred at that depth must have been a one-time event, and it isn't easily explained. That tiny crack on the otherwise rational visage opened a floodgate for speculation. If the chief scientist could not account for some mysterious happenings below, could there be another explanation foreign to science? Maybe the sound was not really voices, but deep-seated geological instability. A resonance due to extreme pressure or the movement of geological layers, or it may be something altogether unclassifiable by science. That chilling honesty left room for more speculation and opened the door to even more bizarre interpretations. Abandoning the abyss. After more than 2 decades of effort, discovery, disaster, and speculation, the Kola Superdeep Borehole finally reached its record-breaking depth of 12,662 meters in 1990. It was a feat unmatched then and still unbeaten today. But instead of celebration, the atmosphere around the project had grown somber. The glory days were over, and the tone had shifted. The deeper they went, the more difficult, costly, and uncertain the work became. What had once been a shining symbol of Soviet scientific ambition was now a crumbling outpost at the edge of human understanding, abandoned not with triumph, but with quiet resignation. The technical difficulties were indeed growing by leaps and bounds. The original target was to reach 15,000 meters, but soon it was evident that this goal was not attainable. The temperature found at the bottom of the borehole reached about 220 degrees, 2 times the expected prediction by the scientists. Rapid degradation of drill bits was caused by this harsh environment. Electronics and sensors failed them. The toughest of metals began to warp under heat and pressure. Below that depth, the Earth proved to be too merciless and turned failure into a constant reality. Even the repairs would take a lot of time and exorbitant cost with every failure. Engineers attempted rescheduling, but were already out of limits that technology could offer. So the experiment's goal shifted from exploration to keep moving. The deeper one went, the harder it got. There was a high measure of stubborn persistence, which slowly gave way to the feeling that the end had come, not just of the crust, but of possibilities as well. The next problem was bigger: money. The early Soviet Union of the 1990s was falling apart. Political and social discomfort with the disintegrating economy was exacerbated by bureaucratic paralysis. Such major plans that had no direct commercial benefits were the first casualties in this disaster. Kola ceased to attract funding as the supply began drying up. The travel to and from remote Arctic sites was rendered very difficult, and without political support, the project began quietly losing the momentum it had. Along came 1992. That's when drilling ceased. There was no formal announcement, no press conference. Simply put, the deepest hole in human history stopped getting deeper. There were some last attempts to resume work, but they amounted to no more than symbolic gestures. By 1995, the Kola Superdeep project had been closed officially. It was closed with a steel cap over a barely round lid that got bolted over the opening. Nothing grand about the marker. There was no monument, just a quiet lid over 12 kilometers of human effort, failure, and mystery. For a while, the installation served as if it were a ghost laboratory, half still abandoned, half still maintained. Visitors spoke of the rusting equipment and scattered documents, haunting emptiness. Today, the buildings lie mostly in ruins. The graffiti that was painted within them no longer stands out. The drill rig is long gone. The only place left is a sealed borehole, an almost inconspicuous circle of metal embedded in concrete concealing whatever lies below. What yet another piece of data amassed during this project stands to be among the more precious geological archives ever created. In the silence of that non-mantle penetration, Kola became revolutionary, instantly changing comprehensions about the crust of the Earth, disproving seismic data as often misinterpreted, suggesting possibly life even deep underground, and just hinting that further mysteries yet to be unveiled remain within our planet. The project left in abandonment a legacy of knowledge and humility. But whispering still goes on among some that the story has not ended there. And while the Soviets sealed their borehole shut across the globe, others were preparing to follow in their footsteps, hoping to succeed where Kola had stopped short. The Bertha Rogers failure. While the Soviets were tunneling through the ancient crust of the Arctic, halfway across the world, the United States had embarked on a deep drilling project of its own. But unlike the Kola Superdeep, the American venture wasn't driven by scientific exploration. It was all about black gold. In 1974, in the oil-rich Anadarko Basin of Oklahoma, the Bertha Rogers well set out to become the deepest oil well in history. Funded by Lone Star Producing Company, this massive project had one goal: to strike oil at unprecedented depths. What they found, however, was something entirely different and deeply unsettling. Bertha Rogers began with immense ambition. Drilling commenced with confidence, bolstered by rising oil prices and booming energy demand. The basin had already proven fruitful for oil exploration, and geologists believed deeper reserves might be waiting below. Within just 502 days, remarkably fast for such an effort, the drill had plunged to a depth of 9,583 meters. At the time, this made it the deepest borehole on Earth, briefly taking the title from the Soviets before Kola pushed further. But that was where the success story ended. Rather than striking a sea of crude oil, the drill came upon something entirely unexpected: a vast subterranean reservoir of molten sulfur. The intense heat and toxic conditions melted drill components within minutes and destroyed the turbine. The reaction was immediate and calamitous. The presence of a liquid sulfur, unusual and chemically volatile material, stopped operations completely. Expensive machinery was lost. Engineers had no other option except to halt the drilling and reconsider the potential risks of going deeper. The small hope it had soon disappeared into a dead end. No pun here. Some literally and others figuratively. It's not geologically odd, but a real lesson on everything we don't know about what's below our feet. The presence of molten sulfur literally challenges the assumptions of what other materials may exist at such depths. The Anadarko Basin, thought to be simply a hydrocarbon source, now posed an underground question of how such a gigantic sulfur pocket formed and what other volatiles may be hiding down there. Yet, in oil and gas, where mystery equals risk, with risk viable for money gone down the drain, the Bertha Rogers driller, once a shining example of American drilling expertise, simply faded into obscurity. In an eerie echo to the dark literature, many of the workers engaged in the project later described the events in disquieting terms: hot vapor hissing from the borehole and the air filled with the stench of sulfur. Sulfur has for a long time been associated with images of hell in pop culture, the very scent of the underworld. While that connection is purely symbolic, it was above all hard to avoid. Rumors began swirling that Bertha Rogers had touched something evil. The very unsettling nature of the failure gave birth to myths, just as in the Kola borehole, that would outlive the project. From a marketing standpoint, the Bertha Rogers was a fiasco. This $15 million investment yielded no oil and no recoverable material. The investors felt a letdown, and Lone Star quietly capped the well. No attempts were subsequently made to drill deeper in that area. The data that were recorded were scanty, and there was no scientific rationale for justifying the continuance of a non-profitable venture at this point. The vision of drilling deeper for what would be huge oil reservoirs has literally been burned into oblivion by the Earth itself. But there was still one more attempt, one rooted in a bold new theory that dared to rewrite the very origin of oil itself. Sweden's Black Mystery. While the Soviet Union had reached unprecedented depths in the pursuit of Earth's secrets, and the United States had faltered in its quest for deep oil, a quieter yet equally ambitious experiment was unfolding in Scandinavia. In the 1980s, Sweden launched a deep drilling project unlike any before it. The goal wasn't just to penetrate the crust, it was to test a radical theory that could rewrite our understanding of fossil fuels. What began as a scientific gamble soon turned into one of the most puzzling episodes in drilling history, thanks to the discovery of a strange jelly-like black substance found nearly 6 kilometers underground. The Swedish project began over the Siljan Ring, a huge impact crater about 52 kilometers wide. This ancient formation was produced by a meteor billions of years ago and has become the focus of a study investigating the so-called abiotic origin of hydrocarbons. According to this still very controversial theory, oil and gas would arise from decomposed organic matter, but could also form through chemical reactions much deeper in the Earth's mantle. If mantle fluids rich in hydrocarbons migrated upward through cracks in the crust, it could provide an explanation for oil in non-sedimentary rock formations and, potentially, huge untapped reserves under regions long thought desolate. Thanks to generous funding and scientific as well as commercial aspirations, Swedish engineers have started drilling a deep exploratory well into the crater. Geophysical surveys indicated that around some 5 kilometers below the surface, there existed porous layers that possibly contained hydrocarbons. As drilling progressed, expectations ran high. If they hit oil in these volcanic rocks, it would be vindication of what had been put forth in the mantle fluid hypothesis and perhaps utterly reshape the contours of the global energy industry. However, the well turned out dry, at the very least in conventional terms, after an expensive affair that lasted several years and resulted in an outlay of over $60 million. There were no deposits of oil or gas that would be commercially viable. For the majority of people involved, it was a disappointing conclusion. The skeptics appeared to have been right. Hydrocarbons are not today produced from these great deep earth processes, and the theory seemed destined to fade into obscurity. Then, some miraculous events happened. On July 11, 1987, while recovering a drill pipe stuck at a depth of 5,945 meters, the engineers suddenly ended up with a payload of about 60 kilograms of a strange black jelly-like substance that stuck to the inside wall of the tool. The substance was thick and sticky, and very unlike any thought-to-be byproducts expected from the drilling process. Initial tests suggested that it was high in magnetite and paraffinic hydrocarbons. Even more interestingly, it contained biomarkers' chemical signatures usually ascribed to biological processes. Some researchers soon speculated this was indeed what they'd been hoping to find: biological material coupled with hydrocarbons deriving from the mantle of the Earth, possibly even some sort of microbial life feeding off of deep chemical energy sources. Such a finding had stirred much concern. Popular science magazines covering stories about the find hailed it as a breakthrough in establishing the abiotic oil theory. For a brief moment, it seemed that Sweden's black jelly might become a game-changer in understanding both our planet's geology and the possibility for life within extreme environments. Some extended the possibility further and voiced claims that similar jelly could exist beneath other planetary slabs down crusts, such as Europa and Mars. However, further inquiry from a somewhat more skeptical group of scientists revealed an ordinary explanation. A week before the black stuff was found, engineers had used a mixture of lubricants to free a stuck drill string. This comprised commercial soda, biodegradable lubricants, and polymers. Under high pressure, heat, and diesel fuel and mineral water, the reactants had undergone changes. What the engineers had recovered wasn't alien life or mantle-borne hydrocarbons. Rather, it was degraded remnants of their own drilling fluid, transformed under extreme conditions. So what really happened at 12,662 meters beneath the Earth's surface? Maybe we'll never know. But one thing's certain: the deeper we dig, the stranger the truth becomes. If this fascinated you, hit like, subscribe, and check out the next video for more mind-bending stories about Earth's forgotten frontiers.